AOC went to the Met Ball, wore a dress that said tax the rich, and said, I know this was going to be awkward, but I had to do it. But was it really awkward? Was it really a statement, or was it just easy fashion sloganing? It's Rob Nelson Live. Hey, I'm Rob Nelson. I used to host a show on Fox, and now I do a digital live stream called Rob Nelson Live. And my whole mission is to figure out how, in this time of division, we can find common ground.
Speech, and they're not allowed to do that anymore.
No, I understand what it's up.
They be focused on rebuilding California.
Oh, it's so true. Come on. This is where this gets real.
He says your headings.
I wouldn't want to be black and driving in a car.
Right.
Point there, right? Some of what's in this music, you can't sanitize it. All right, everybody, welcome to Rob Nelson Live, streaming on all different social platforms. As always, love your interaction, your interactivity. We go back and forth. We've been off for a week, so it's good to be back. So going to cover a couple things today, but I want to jump right in with AOC and the Met Gala, the Met Ball. So the Met Gala is this big costume event. It's also called the Met Ball. It's a benefit for the institute. I wrote it down here, the Costume Institute Gala, or they call the Costume Institute Benefit, also known as the Met Ball. But basically, it's the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Costume Institute in New York City. And it's a big, ritzy, super expensive, star-studded event. AOC showed up wearing a dress that said, tax the rich, white dress. It was quite a bold statement. It was a bold statement dress, 100% for sure. Kind of like Joy Villa, who used to wear the Trump dresses to the Grammys. It was like the progressive on the right. It was the progressive version of that, with a white dress, bold red writing, tax the rich. She made a big deal out of it because she was like, I'm showing up, and I'm gonna, I know this is gonna be awkward for people, but I have to do it. I have a little clip of her on the red carpet. Crafty, let's just play that right now. Okay, we'll play that in a minute. Crafty, when you're back, let's play the clip. So she shows up at the ball wearing the dress, and again, making the statement that she is, kind of boldly challenging the rich. Now, here's the thing. I don't fundamentally have a problem with the message at all. And a lot of people were super critical of her for wearing the dress, going to the ball. That's, it's debatable. Let me, I think Crafty's back. Crafty, can we play the clip? I want you to hear what she said. It's just a piece of it. Okay. Crafty, do we have that clip or no? All right. We'll get the clip, guys. We'll get the clip. AOC's messing with our system. No, so what I was saying was, I don't fundamentally have a problem that she would go to the ball. Some people challenge that she should even go to it. And, she's a congressman from New York, and lots of public officials go to it. It's a fundraising gala. I don't fundamentally think like you shouldn't show up at a gala because, because you're a politician. That's what you do. Politicians go to galas. Politicians go to things. It's a huge, big deal. It's a big event. And the Metropolitan Museum of Art is a huge cultural institution. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And of course, people on the right are going to criticize her for that. I don't have a problem with that at all. My problem has to do with something else. So I think we do have the clip. Let's play the clip, Crafty.
We really started having a conversation about what it means to be working class women of color at the Met. And we said, we can't just play along, but we need to break the fourth wall and challenge some of the institutions. And while the Met is known for its spectacle, we should have a conversation about it.
So the Fox News headline, AOC chooses fame over advocacy. That's what I'm going, no. I mean, that's their little narrative that, there's nothing wrong with a politician, a charismatic politician who's social media savvy, using whatever vehicle he or she can to get focus, to get attention. AOC's been great at drawing attention to her agenda. Now, she could also be trying to be famous. I don't know. Maybe most politicians are narcissistic and want to be famous, want attention, want everyone to like them. It's sort of part of the job of being a politician. It's almost in the blood. It's sort of baked into being a politician. I don't have a problem with that. She talks about women of color going and breaking the fourth wall and sort of boldly wearing this dress into this event. Well, first of all, what's bold about wearing a tax the rich dress at an event that's largely filled with liberal rich people? Liberal rich people are going to be all fine with taxing themselves more. The truth is, this whole notion that taxing rich people more is somehow going to destroy the economy, it's almost like a red herring on both sides. It's like, first of all, taxing the rich isn't going to lift our economy out of its problems, nor is taxing the rich going to fundamentally hurt rich people very much. I always hear this notion, well, if you tax rich people, well, then they're not going to work as hard. Really? I don't know about that. I don't think so. The fundamental problem with our taxation system is that it's supposed to be a progressive system which taxes people progressively more based on their income. But in fact, it's by default, the way it works, a fundamentally regressive system. It doesn't really work that way, because the more money you make, the more affluence you have, the more you are able to typically shield yourself from taxes. And the simple reality is that if you're a person making a lower income, even a middle class income, but certainly a lower income, your marginal tax rate is devastatingly more impactful than if you're an ultra rich person making a 50% higher, paying a 50% higher marginal tax rate. In other words, if I'm making $50,000 a year and I'm paying 20% or 21% in taxes, anywhere even close to that, even 18%, it's a massive dent. It's 20% of my income, and my income isn't high enough to really let me do very much anyway. So when you take that away, you're really making it hard for me to live. You're making it hard for me to operate, especially in an inflationary world. If I'm making $10 million a year and you're taxing me 39%, so what? My money after that, and by the way, I won't pay 39% because there's all kinds of loopholes to carve it out and investments and ways to shield my income. At the end of the day, I'll pay a much lower tax rate. Nobody pays the actual tax rate. The rich people never pay the amount that their tax rate is. Poor people often do. Rich people find all kinds of ways to shrink it. It's inherent in it. But even if they did pay the full marginal rate, they still make so much more money when you're making over $1 million that you are going to be able to live perfectly fine. You're going to actually be able to do whatever you want. You're going to be able to invest and build your wealth. You're not going to be materially hindered from that process because of a higher tax rate. So the notion that rich people should freak out at being taxed more, to me, is stupid and ridiculous. But equally, the notion that somehow just tax the rich, tax the rich, tax the rich, as if that's the answer. That's the solution to our economic problems. That's our solution to trillions of dollars in debt, to our massive deficits, to all the needs we have that we can't afford. The answer is just to tax rich people more? It's a joke. Meanwhile, most corporations evade taxes at such a massive level. Gavin Newsom stomps Republicans' guts out. Monkey arms, 100% true. Don't worry, monkey arms. I'm getting to that. It's coming later in the show, so just stick around. That's gonna be like the finale, Gavin Newsom. And yes, he did stomp the Republicans. Hands down, monkey arms. I'll talk about that. But let me first, I'll come back to that. It'll be my loop around. But let me finish with AOC. Thanks, Cody. Appreciate it. So again, the notion that taxing the rich is this somehow bold statement, particularly amongst a bunch of liberals, is to me just an absolute joke, utter joke. And again, red herring on both sides. Red herring for rich people to claim somehow it'll undo the economy and we'll all go crumbling down, massive socialism. Or two, that it will somehow solve our economic problems if we just make rich people pay a little more. Like, and granted, you go, rich people make so much more of the income. But like I said, then the truth is you have a flat tax. You want an honest tax system? Have a flat tax. Make a very low flat tax. Maybe it's Steve Forbes actually had this idea years ago. Make a very low number. Maybe it's 11%. Everybody pays 11%. If you make, with one exception, very poor people pay nothing. If you're below a certain income level, you pay 0 in taxes. Anybody above that minimal sort of poverty level pays 11%. If I make $60,000, if I make $120,000, if I make $50 million, I pay 11%. No loopholes, 0, no mortgage deduction, no child tax credits, 0 loopholes. Everybody pays 11%. If I make $50 million, I pay 11% of my $50 million. I pay $110 million. It's that simple. But sorry, that was a little high. I pay, that number was a little, my math isn't very good. And the reason that would work, because then you'd actually be proportionally taxing people. Rich people couldn't get out of paying their actual fair share, and poor people and middle-class people wouldn't be burdened with a higher percentage of their income. So that's a fair solution. But back to my issue with AOC, the reason I have a problem with it is the notion that this was somehow some bolt. It was virtue signaling. I mean, I have her Instagram post, part of it. Crafty, can you put up her Instagram post? And by the way, Monkey Arms, I agree. Only the poor pay taxes. And that's not actually completely true. The middle class pay taxes. Middle class pays a lot of taxes. Rich people pay almost no taxes. Yeah, I'm going to just sidebar story. Years ago when I was doing my youth political action group, Lead or Leave, nonpartisan for those of you who don't know, by the way, I was like the Democrat. We were Democrats, but we wanted both sides to the table. A very, very wealthy man who's now a billionaire, Stanley Druckenmiller, and he wasn't a billionaire yet, but he was on his way. And Clinton was going to raise marginal tax rates on the rich, just like we're talking about now. And he told me, I am going to spend whatever it takes on tax lawyers to not pay the increased taxes. I was like, but you're just pouring the same amount of money out. He's like, I'll pour more out. I just don't want to pay the taxes. I'll pay people and they'll make money. Accountants and lawyers will make money so that I don't pay more taxes, even if I spend the same amount of money. And the point there is, rich people can always get around taxes. Look, all these big corporations, in particular corporations that claim to be so progressive, so socially conscious, they pay 0. Amazon pays like 0 taxes. They find a way out of it. It's completely and utterly absurd. And it's kind of horrendously offensive. So tax the rich, what a joke. But here's my issue. Let's pop the tweet up. It's not a tweet. It's an Instagram post. Pop that up real quick. So she said, the medium is the message, with a very classy picture with her designer, masked designer, and AOC not masked. And then she says further down in the post, the time is now for childcare, healthcare, and climate action for all. Tax the rich. And yes, before anybody starts getting crazy, officials are regularly invited to the Met. I was one of several in attendance, dresses borrowed. Great. So, yeah. And I started this out. Thanks, Crafty. Started this out saying, I don't care that she went to the Met Gala. Who cares? There's nothing wrong or inappropriate with doing that. The right just wants to pile on because it's AOC, and both sides like to pile on when the other side does something. But the notion that she's like childcare, healthcare, climate change, tax the rich. Well, that's not going to fund those things. But more importantly, and this is where I want to leave it with AOC, this is my bigger issue. It's to me a little hypocritical. You're saying you're making a bold statement going into the Met wearing a tax the rich dress because there's a lot of rich people there who, again, most are liberal. And those who aren't, whether they're conservative or not, they know that more taxes on them is going to be a pain, but it's not going to cripple their lives. The bold statement would be to make a statement about the income inequality in this country. The things AOC says she's all about, and I'm not saying she is or isn't, but the things she says she's all about, leveling the playing field, creating a populist progressive agenda, that we have this massive disparity in quality of life, in income. If you want to address those systemic inequalities, you don't tax the rich. Show up at that. I'm not saying don't go to the Met Gala. Show up at the Met Gala with a dress that says this event shouldn't happen. A dress that says you all should be ashamed, and let people go, ashamed of what? And say, ashamed of the fact that you throw this lavish, massive, over-the-top event, $30,000 a seat, spend God knows how much money to do it, like all the other ones and all the award ceremonies and all this. Well, literally a massive portion of this country is underwater. How about get your priorities straight? How about, oh, great, you're funding the Met costuming. And I get it, it's art and blah, blah, blah. But I'm saying if you really care, call rich people out for their lifestyles. Call celebrities out for their extravagant, off the charts lifestyles in which they say, yeah, we'll pay a little more in taxes and we're all for good progressive causes, while they live lives so out of touch with everybody else. I mean, I'm not a communist here. I'm not going all Marxist on you guys, but that's where those guys came from, right? The Che Guevaras, the Fidel Castros. And by the way, if you don't know the history, Che Guevara was like the original. Castro came in, kind of stomped Che Guevara out, same as Lenin and Trotsky. Trotsky got stomped out, but Che Guevara, Leon Trotsky, they ideologically were like, we want to change the class system. I don't think they had the right answer. I don't think the Marxist communist solution worked, but I get where it's coming from. They had these monarchies, these royalties, these powerful groups of condensed people who controlled everything, the monarchy and all the oligarchs and the people with all the money and resources, and everybody else got screwed. And they were like, F that. Let's level the playing field. Now, again, I don't think their solution to sort of try to make everybody equal really worked, but their justifiable outrage at the inequality, if that's what you're mad at, don't wear a dress that says tax the rich. Wear something that says you guys are all disgusting and you need to get your priorities straight, period, in your lifestyles. It's nice to virtue signal. It's nice to jump on the bandwagon for the cause, but you're not actually being impacted at all. So you want to make change, impact your own lives meaningfully. That I would have more respect for. I'm not saying AOC doesn't want that. I'm saying she didn't have the guts to really go there, and the kind of fun little thing, we're women of color challenging the cultural institutions and the fourth wall, is a little bit like, whatever. You're on the cover of Vogue. You're not challenging anything really, Again, you're a Latina woman. Great. There's no like in here. You're not victimized, and you make $174,000 a year. So again, maybe cut your salary in half too. How about every rich person cut their salary in half? Call on rich liberals to cut their income in half and give half of all their incomes to causes. How about that? I'd admire that. Cody, what about the handout the government gives the poor for whatever nefarious reason? I mean, this gets to a larger issue, and I'll just touch on it quickly. I mean, the notion that the government gives handouts to the poor, I mean, again, there's two sides to that. One is there's a legitimate social aspect of wanting to benefit those who are in need. And historically, that was always going back to the, monarchies. You kind of gave to people who didn't have anything, right? Charity, and government became a form of charity. The notion that it's nefarious, that's debatable. Sure, some could argue it's become built into the system to where, if you got a bunch of poor people in an urban district or even a rural district, but it certainly plays out in dense urban districts. The more you give them, the more they're going to be beholden to voting for your party. There's some probably systemic truth in that, but I'm not a big believer in over focusing on the systemicness and how that has motives. What I would say is we are entering a new decentralized era where the notion that the only way to help people is somehow a socialist handout is false, as is the notion on the other side that you can't help people. They have to simply pull themselves up by the bootstraps, give everyone an equal opportunity, and things will be fine. Both are very flawed arguments on both the left and the right. They're utterly flawed. They are opposing views, right? Because I can argue, well, you know, to the argument on the right, government gives money to all kinds of things. It doesn't just give money to poor people. It subsidizes companies. Heck, you build a stadium in a city, the city subsidies. You bring the Olympics in. Governments subsidize all kinds of interests, and they're often powerful interests that make tons of money from those subsidies and don't really need them. On the other side of the coin, the notion that just like, you know, you just have to like give handouts to everybody and create a dependency mindset is equally flawed. Here's the reality, the future. I'm not going to get too into it today, but the future of the decentralized world. This is why I talk a lot about blockchain, Bitcoin, crypto in general, but I mean crypto and blockchain, the technology that cryptos are built on. The whole notion of this new decentralized model that challenges centralized banks, that challenges centralized institutions, is that we can do these things in a way. There's a new definition of capitalism. When I'm in Puerto Rico, I'm surrounded by a bunch of people who are libertarians. Many of them have made a fortune, and their view is, hey, you know what? Let's have a universal basic income. What? Andrew Yang was onto that. How could you have a universal basic income? That's like complete lefty. It's not. You can have universal health care and a universal basic income, and that is completely consistent with a conservative view of economics, a modern, yet to be fully understood view of capitalism that realizes that if you gave everybody a basic income, you could slowly stop giving them all kinds of other dependency things, but you would empower people to do what they need to do. You are getting enough to live. So if you want to be an artist, go be an artist. If you're a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad, we'll reward you for staying at home. And if you're a multimillionaire, you still get that amount, because everybody gets it and everybody can build from it. The amount of growth that would create is massive. And that's why libertarians and often people in the blockchain and the crypto world view it as a completely realistic thing to be a libertarian and basically think the government should not take any of my money, go away with taxes, F off, and say at the same time, let's have a universal basic income. We got to start realizing we're heading into the old paradigms. The old institutions are crumbling and we're clinging on to them. Tax the rich is that old institution. And so is giving people a basic income. That's total socialism, old institution, old model. It's dying and it's going to be stomped out. And cryptocurrencies are going to drive that because they're going to start attacking the centralized banking system, which is the government's ultimate way of keeping control. Okay, let me move on because I used a lot of time on this and I wasn't going to use this much time on it. Let me talk a little about what just happened the other day with Bob Woodward and Bob Costa's book that came out, in which you even know about this, but it was about stuff around the beginning of the Biden presidency and the end of the Trump presidency. And one of the things in the beginning of the Biden presidency, that stuff's sort of like old news. We've heard it all before. You know, Biden was being scripted. They wanted Chief of Staff Ron Klein wants to keep him away from events where he's can freelance and talk. All that stuff we knew. But what we didn't know, if it is true, is that supposedly Joint Chiefs of Staff General Mark Milley decided on his own that Trump was such a threat, a potential threat, that he was going to take it on into his own hands to ensure that Trump could not start a war. And that he reached out several times on several occasions to, among others, to his counterpart in the Chinese army, warning him that everything was okay in Washington. Okay. And B, if there was going to be any kind of attack, he would notify the Chinese general beforehand. Wow. Now, you would think everyone on both sides of the spectrum would be going, wait a minute, you're a general. You are not elected. You don't get to decide that. We elected a president. That president gets to decide. That president, we don't want that president. Remove him from office, impeachment, or the next election. We have checks and balances built in place with our multiple, the legislative, the executive, the judicial. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, the military, answers to the elected commander in chief. You don't get to decide. You think this time he's not right and you're making a different call. That's what happens in all kinds of countries when you have coups. We don't think the government's doing the right thing. The military's taking over. Now, what happened was interesting to me was so much of the media, again, not Fox News did its thing, and both sides of the media run their uni-narratives. It's like watch them side by side. It's like two totally different stories that are extreme in both cases. But it stunned me to watch CNN literally saying how this was proof how dangerous Trump was and not really even focusing on, well, maybe you think he was dangerous, but it's really dangerous if you're worried about the Constitution and what's right to have the Joint Chiefs of Staff General calling the a Chinese general saying, if we were to attack you, I'd warn you first. Having a back channel, telling people that they don't answer to the president, they answer through him. That goes against the most fundamental thing in our Constitution about the military answers to the civilian elected leadership. Half this country elected Donald Trump, and half this country voted to keep him in office a second time. He survived 2 impeachments. You can argue he should have been removed by the Senate, but he wasn't, because half the Senate was elected by people who wanted to keep him in office. That's the voters' choice. The military doesn't get to decide, but we think the voters are wrong, and we think the president could do something really bad, and the voters, all those voters are misguided in supporting him. We have to step in. It's the utter disregard of the Constitution. Oddly enough, someone who agrees with that was the whistleblower. He's retired now, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who, if you remember, was the guy on the Ukraine call, right? Who then testified in the impeachment hearings. Chris Cuomo brought him on CNN, and this is what Vindman had to say.
To me, seems like the wrong thing for seemingly the right reason. There's not a way to get away with that. There's not a way to walk away from that unscathed. I just finished writing a book about doing the right thing in the right way. And this, to me, screams of doing the wrong thing. Ultimately, the American public held the president accountable and removed him from office by voting in a new president. What we can't have is the senior military officer acting without any oversight, exceeding his authorities, without civilian control. This is, again, a sacrosanct principle. Even if he did this for the right reasons, he did the wrong thing, and now he is toxic.
So I want to address a couple things, and I'm going to take a couple comments that Monkey Arms put up in a second. I'm going to back up and grab those because I want to address them. So first of all, the notion that well, I'll start with those comments right away. Monkey Arms said he didn't do it on his own. You see that there, Crafty? It was all above water. Lots of people knew, but he was in full authority to do what he did. So there's 2 things I want to point out. This has become a convenient, quick narrative. I'm going to call it the CNN narrative. It's the Democratic Party narrative. I'm not saying all the media on the left of center does this. The Washington Post, New York Times have actually increasingly become, I think, pretty fair in how they're covering both the Biden administration and politics in general. They're not as extreme as they were with Trump, but they never should have been that extreme. So I don't expect them to be equally extreme against Biden. He was in full authority to talk to his counterpart. Absolutely. I'm going to remind you guys of something. Vindman is the odd irony of all this, is that the guy who tried to bring Trump down for this very reason, who was on the call in Ukraine, is now the guy saying, hey, wait a minute. The problem with Trump and Ukraine wasn't that Trump couldn't talk to the president of Ukraine. It's what he said in the call. That's why he got impeached. Whether you think he should have been or not, people felt that was not okay to essentially be asking to help take down his opponent. The problem that's above board is not that General Miley can't talk to his Chinese counterpart. Of course, generals talk to generals all the time. But you cannot go around the president of the United States, order all of your subordinate officers to go through you before they make any decisions that the president might order. And 2, if it is true, and again, he may come out and say it isn't, but that he warned the Chinese general that in the event of an attack, he would warn him. That is not Monkey Arms at all in full authority. And when you say the next one, you said the general answers to the Constitution, not that one. The general answers to the Constitution, not to the president. Yes and no. The general answers to the Constitution, and under the Constitution, this is basic. He is under the authority. The commander-in-chief is the president of the United States. Now, he could choose to not execute an unconstitutional request. I'm the president. I've been voted out of office. Sound familiar? I am not leaving office, and I am ordering you, General, to line the gates with troops and stop anyone from removing me. No, Mr. President, you've been voted out. The Constitution has a pattern of secession. You have been elected, unelected. Someone else has been elected. I answer to the Constitution. But in answering to the Constitution, he answers to the president as commander-in-chief for constitutionally legitimate actions. And were Donald Trump to have declared war, FYI, the whole irony of this is Trump is the only president in like, I don't know how many presidents, maybe like the last 7, who hasn't actually started a war. For all the talk he was going to start a war, it's the only one that didn't. Every other president started a war. Biden hasn't yet. Is that you can't, if the president decided to launch a military strike on China, that's not unconstitutional. If he chose to do some kind of strategic military, he can't declare war. That takes Congress to declare war. But again, Congress decides. The president has extreme room to use military action. That is governed and protected in the Constitution, and the general has to answer to it. He can resign. He can say, I won't execute those orders because I think they're immoral or I don't think they're right. I resign, next in command. But he doesn't have the right to stop it. You elected the president as commander-in-chief. He gets to make those decisions. And as Vindman points out and others have pointed out, the problem is, what if someone uses this for a different reason? A general doesn't just get to decide what he thinks, what the president's mental state isn't good enough, that he might do something he doesn't think is right. It's not in his prerogative. He can resign, but he cannot go around the president. That violates one of the most fundamental things in our Constitution. If he, in fact, told the Chinese general, I will warn you of an attack. If my commander-in-chief orders a military attack, I will warn you first. That is treason. That is an utter violation of the Constitution. You could go, yeah, but we don't want a war. Well, you elected a president, half this country did, who might choose to have that war. And as screwed up as you may think that is, that's how democracy works. The people elect the president, he's the commander-in-chief. The people don't want him, they remove him, which they did. Only by a little bit. Half the country still wanted him. That's how the system works. It's that simple. And the irony to me is that people were so upset about the Ukrainian phone call, and they demanded Trump release the transcript of the call, which he did. And it was the right thing to do. I'm going to say the same. General Mark Milley should release the transcript of the call. He's got nothing to hide. You know, Monkey Arms, you say he did nothing wrong. Release the transcript of the call. Full disclosure, this is a transparent administration. It's the least transparent I've seen. Every administration is going to be transparent. Each one seems to be less than the one before. Release it. Trump released the Ukraine call as he should have. And he said, I did nothing wrong. Well, a lot of people disagreed. They impeached him. Senate didn't convict him. Release the transcript of the call. If he did nothing wrong, was completely above board, release the transcript of the call. And let us see. If you don't release the transcript, what you're telling me is you said something that you weren't allowed to say, that you violated your constitutional oath, and you went around the commander-in-chief who had not made an unconstitutional request of you, who you were afraid might make a decision you don't agree with, and you went around him and you violated your oath of the Constitution and probably committed a treasonous act. You watch, they're not going to release that transcript because he probably did say, I'll warn you. And that would be treason. Simple as that. Okay, we're going to wrap this up on a couple quick things. FYI, still no accountability on Afghanistan. Don't get me down that road, but it's driving me nuts. You know, House Secretary Blinken and Defense Secretary Austin and any number of generals haven't been asked to resign is beyond me. By the way, interesting, comes out also in the book, the Woodward-Costas book, that both Blinken, Secretary of State Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin actually tried to get Biden to extend the withdrawal time. Right? Not a surprise. They lost that battle. Again, Biden's decision, same as it was Trump's. But the utter disaster that was this withdrawal should demand some accountability. I don't care if you argue we should, would have been a mess whenever we left. I'll just say it in simple terms. Wouldn't have had to have been this much of a mess. They screwed up. A simple military decision of moving your troops out before you get all the citizens out. Who does that? Keep them there till you got everyone out, then lift your troops out, the last core of your troops, your Air Force base at Bagram, whatever. It was such a mess. And that there's been no accountability. And I just want to say, because I'm going to do the little Trump thing, just imagine if you are on the left, if Trump were president, had botched this withdrawal. Let's say he'd won again and pushed the withdrawal through. And everyone said, well, he was on a political timeline, Trump. So was Biden. Biden wanted to do it by September 11th. You're on a political byline. He would have been slammed for that. He flies back from a vacation at Camp David to give a quick address and then turns around, heads back to Camp David, what Biden did the first time. Trump would have been hammered beyond belief. Then the whole thing goes disastrously wrong. People die, terrorists bomb. People would have been livid calling for his impeachment. Then he does a drone strike to take out the terrorists. And it turns out that that he didn't get any terrorists. And by the way, they still haven't released the names of the terrorists, right? Remember they said they said, well, we hit important people, but they won't say who. When they know they're important, they say who. Then it turns out the New York Times, Washington Post does detailed reporting and concludes, in fact, the guy they said they hit who was a terrorist was actually an aid worker, AID, aid worker. New York Post, New York Times, Washington Post. So they actually targeted the wrong person. And Secretary Blinken says, I'm not under questioning. I'm not sure who we hit. So basically, they hit the wrong guy. Boy, if Trump had done that, it would have been clearly an intentional political move to try to do it to cover up. I'm not saying that's what Biden did. It's very possible that they wanted to do something quick to make it look like they made a hasty decision. I'll bet intelligence agencies were like, our data's not 100% on this, but you make the call. It's your job, commander in chief. Where was the general going? I won't launch that strike until we know 100% certain who we're hitting. Nope. President's call. And not unconstitutional, but it screwed up. Trump done all that, gone, looked at his watch at the service, then been dissed by Gold Star families. And media would have literally gone nuts. He would have been impeached for his third time. I'm just saying, let's at least hold Biden a little accountable. Let's at least make somebody resign, for God's sake. It was a messed up job. There's still hundreds of Americans, not 50, not 100. People I'm talking to are there behind the lines, have been there, have deep connections, but in the military, in the State Department, in the intelligence community, in the veterans community. There's probably 500 to 1,000 at least left behind. This story gets so murky. Anyway, no accountability. Final thing, I told Monkey Arms I would not forget about Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom kicked butt for sure. He took down Larry Elder. Any real surprise there, guys? Any real shocker there? The media is depicting it like, oh my God, like, look at what this means for 2022. Don't get your hopes up. Gavin Newsom better have won the recall. He lives in a state that is 2-to-1 Democratic voters. And people are saying, yeah, but the voters were apathetic. The Republicans were wound up. Well, the Republicans were wound up, but there's half as many. And secondly, Larry Elder was the worst possible choice. Like, if you wanted to win people over who were neutral in the middle, Larry Elder isn't going to do it. You needed a candidate who was not Newsom, but who was like conservative, but not Larry Elder. I mean, Larry Elder's way over here. So Larry Elder gave Gavin Newsom his gift, his like golden slipper or whatever, and gave him the ultimate way to win. It's no shocker to me that Gavin Newsom won or that he won big. It would have been disastrous had he lost. But even then, I wouldn't say it reflects very much of anything that's going to happen in the midterm elections. And that's where people are getting a little crazy, going, this is a sign that that this happened and this means great things for Democrats in the midterms. It doesn't, guys. Don't go soft and think that. If you're a Democrat right now, don't look at this as any more than if Gavin Newsom lost. I wouldn't be like, see, Democrats are in trouble. California was its own unique thing, and California is a Democratic state through and through. When you get to the midterms, it's a whole different landscape. You're dealing with a country divided 50%. You're not dealing with a place where it's 2-to-1. You're also dealing with a historic trend where midterm elections that go against a president, even when they're doing okay. And Biden's not doing well, no matter how much you want to spin it. Afghanistan was a disaster. His domestic policy agenda is stalling. He may not even get the infrastructure bill passed now because they're not going to get the $3.5 trillion other stuff. And the progressives are maybe going to chop down the infrastructure bill. The voting bill is going to go nowhere. It'll pass through the House and it'll die in the Senate. His agenda's dead. COVID madness continues with people just not knowing what's up. The FDA's, now saying you probably don't need booster shots. Biden, they were like, get the booster shots. People are like, what is going on? Like with this pandemic, where are we at it? Nobody really knows what to believe anymore, right? And it all comes down to the economy. People's lives aren't going up on the economic scale. And all of that has nothing, before I add in that there is a national redistricting that goes on every 10 years because of the census, and that's this upcoming election. And Republicans control more state legislatures than Democrats. So that means they'll redistrict to their favor. All of that is bad news for Democrats who only have like a 5-seat majority in the House and a 0-seat majority, the tying vote with the vice president in the Senate. So if I'm a Democrat, do not look at Gavin Newsom's win as some sign of like promising hope. You guys are going to have a heck of a hard time in the midterms. You would anytime, any president would. And you need, and people are also going to be apathetic because they're like, really, things didn't go as planned. Republicans are going to win the House and probably the Senate is my bet. But Gavin Newsom did win. And if you're in California, you get what you deserve. I mean, you want Gavin Newsom, you get Gavin Newsom. I think he's a horrible governor, not because he's a Democrat. And I don't think Larry Elder would have been a good governor, by the way. No, I'm just saying, not at all. But Newsom's been a horrible governor. He's just a career politician. He hasn't done much good for the state. Now, some people might disagree with that. That's great. Fair enough. But I promise you, had there been a really good Democratic candidate on that ticket, which they made sure no good Democrats got on that ticket, it was like, you do, we'll destroy you. Had somebody been gutsy enough to go, I don't care, I'm going for it. I'm going for it. I'm going to take Newsom on, and been a really solid Democrat. You guys in California, Democrats, you would have voted for him to get rid of Newsom. Most people don't love Newsom that much, but they couldn't stand the thought of Larry Elder, which I understand. Bottom line, partisan politics in this country is sadly more alive and well than ever. We've not only been able to polarize a pandemic, we polarize everything now. There is nothing we can't polarize. All of which brings me back to where I started. The real polarization in this country that isn't illegitimate is the difference between the haves and the have-nots. That is legitimate. And most people in politics and national politics are haves. AOC is now a have. She may say she's for the have-nots, but she's a have. So, again, at the end of the day, that divide is real. That income divide is real. That inequality is real. And that's something we have to fix. I think the answer is going to come from a more decentralized approach to economics, to politics. I think we're going to start seeing that in the next 10 years. And as I've said before, it's going to come from a populism on both sides of the equation. Donald Trump was a pseudo-populist on the right, and his populist appeal drew voters, but he wasn't really a populist. AOC, I'm beginning to think she's kind of a pseudo-populist on the left, but don't get me wrong. Populism is going to win. Thanks for watching. It's Rob Nelson Live.